Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Risk with Dr. Naveen Agarwal. Each week, we talk about a topic related to risk management of medical devices in a very casual and informal way. This is not a webinar or lecture. Rather, our goal is to talk about key topics and challenges in a very informal way and share best practices. I'm your host, Naveen Agarwal, and I'm the principal and founder at Achieve, where my personal mission is to help you achieve success in risk management. My guest in this episode is Dr. Emanuel Tkach. He is a medical doctor with specialties in the GI and cardiology area, but recently he transitioned into the medical device industry as a clinical researcher and medical director. He is working in the area of designing, developing, and executing clinical studies, especially in the area of AI machine learning based medical devices. In this conversation, we are focusing on some of the unique challenges when thinking about clinical investigations of AI ML based devices and what to consider from a risk management point of view. We had this conversation in front of a live audience as part of our weekly LinkedIn live audio event. You're about to hear a recording of our conversation. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to our weekly Let's Talk Risk conversation. My name is Naveen Agarwal, and I'm so excited to welcome all of you. Guys, I'm so excited to welcome our guest today, Dr. Emanuel Tkach. He has such a wonderful perspective on medical devices because he's coming at it from a medical practitioner side. He's a doctor, and now he has transitioned into the industry, working in the clinical trial space, even with artificial intelligence-driven devices. So I just can't wait to get this conversation going with him. So with that, I'm so excited to welcome you, Dr. Tkach. Could you please start by introducing yourself and in particular, share how you transition into the medical device industry from your clinical practice?
Thank you so much, Naveen, for having me. Hello, everyone. My name is Emanuel Tkach. And I transitioned from clinical practice into the clinical trial space and the industry side roughly 2.5 years ago. And my focus was to bring a clinician's perspective into the practical application of medical devices and software as a medical device, which also included artificial intelligence.
That's wonderful. Yeah. That's wonderful. So one thing I'm very curious about is when you transitioned into the industry, what were some of the first things that kind of jumped out at you that where you felt you could add some really special value as a doctor?
As a doctor, I always asked myself why certain protocols existed. And when I transitioned into the industry side of it, I realized that I could improve on some of those protocols that existed and also facilitate new research with more focused protocols and other focuses, including how the regulatory process and how regulations overall are designed to mitigate risk.
Very, very nice. Very good. So you are bringing a perspective from a clinical side, but now also you have a good understanding of the regulatory side as well as risk management. Can you help us visualize a scenario? Let's set the stage in a team that you're working with, who all is involved, and how do you go about facilitating that conversation, leading that conversation into planning and designing a clinical trial early on?
Absolutely. So I can say that I spent about 2 years in the GI space on the clinician side, and now I'm involved in projects where the company integrates artificial intelligence for the purpose of what is called CADe and the purpose that is called CADx as well. CADe is computer-aided detection, and CADx is computer-aided diagnosis. The purpose of this technology is to both detect and diagnose potential cancerous polyps for such as colorectal carcinomas, as well as Barrett's esophagus. So the technology is that is the purpose of the technology. And the perspective that I bring is the practical application as to how that would be used during the medical exam.
Yeah. So now that I hear you say this, I think, I'm thinking this is a tool to assist the physicians who are doing the work there, right? This is a tool as a sort of an assistant, right? And one of the things that I think about is maybe over-reliance on a tool like this. Would that be relevant to you, and how would you go about, thinking that view when you design a trial, or maybe even think about intended use or limitations?
Yes, absolutely, and I agree. The human brain is designed to find the easiest path, and sometimes people are not as focused, and having over-reliance on technology overall it could potentially lead to disasters. So one of the things that I do is I make sure to express and explain the importance that the investigator has. And one of the ways that we agreed upon designing the trial is to do it blinded. Now, how do you do something blinded when there's a bouncing box on the screen?
Yeah.
So that is some of the things that we've handled and we've discussed. And I don't want to get too much into it to express it. It has been addressed.
Okay, I got you. Now, I was just curious. I'm sure this is like a common problem that people have to tackle. Are there any standards around it? Are there any like something that people can lean on, or is it just sort of a black magic or art that you are developing?
No, there's no black magic here. It's all white. And yes, actually, there are quite a few standards that I myself am heavily involved in and pursue. Is there are 3 ISO standards that I follow myself.
Okay.
Well, the first one that I'd like to discuss is ISO 14155, which many of us know. That's just for the overall medical device. What people sometimes don't understand is that software as a medical device still falls under a medical device, even though there's no physical, tangible, such as a defibrillator, for example, to touch and hold and say, this is a device. Software is a device. Another ISO that I highly recommend is ISO 13485, which is for your quality management. And that also includes AI and SAMD, which is software as a medical device. The newest ISO that I've been reading up on has been released just this past December 18th, 2023. It's ISO 42001. This is the world's first AI management system standard. And it sets out a structured way to manage risk and optimize opportunities associated with AI, balancing innovation with governance.
Very cool. This is very amazing. Could you share a couple of just key highlights with us from this standard?
It gets very technical very quickly, and to those that may not be so familiar with AI and machine learning and coding and things of that nature, I don't want to bombard them with technical jargon. I will say, however, though, that the most important thing that is discussed here is something called design freeze. And what design freeze is that you, when creating an AI and applying it to software as a medical device, there has to be a point where you tell your algorithm, I am no longer feeding you any more material to learn from. So this is your 1.0. The next time you want to update your algorithm in your AI, that is now a new device that you can potentially do a 510K from your existing device as a 2.0 and 3.0 and so on and so forth. So that's just some of the ways that you can use the ISO standards and get through the regulatory process.
So this is interesting. I'm curious now, before you get to 1.0, for example, would you have to do sort of design verification, design validation, or even clinical trial?
You absolutely need a V&V. And you also have to provide full QMS and quite a few other documentations, including the IFU. And what a lot of people, including the inventors, don't understand is that they might have the idea of what they want the IFU to be, which is your usage. And at the end of the day, I've personally been involved in quite a few discussions where we had to alter what the inventor thought the IFU should be so that it would have the strongest clinical perspective and potential use as a device.
That's interesting. Now, of course, Dr. Tkach, on this forum, we talk about risk management a little bit, and I would just want to ask you if there are any new insights from a risk management perspective that we as practitioners should be sort of more familiar with when it comes to AI-based devices. What it is that you would like to highlight to us as risk practitioners?
As risk practitioners, I would say that your verification and validation report is your best quality management system. Understanding that the two are very integrated and intertwined with one another will help you get through a lot of hurdles and also understand and mitigate the risks that you see that will pop up as you develop your technology further. So the quality management system and making sure that you have a very strong SOP or standard of practice is crucial to how you develop your technology.
Now, in particular, I'm actually quite curious to learn from you. When it comes to AI or software-based devices, are there any sort of special considerations from a risk point of view that we should be aware of?
Yes, reliance. Reliance is one of the most dangerous things that a practitioner can do. Relying too heavily on the technology that is still new, no matter what they promised, no matter what came up as in terms of how the quality of its detection. It is, at the end of the day, as you said earlier, a tool to be used by the clinician and not the end-all, be-all. Whatever the device said, that's what it is.
And, as engineers, we might get very fascinated by technology too, right? And we might say, look how good it is and how much it can do. But the point you are making is that at the end of the day, it should be treated as an assistant to the clinician, not as a replacement to their decision-making.
That is correct. And one of the things I want to add is to say that as I've had many discussions with a variety of engineers, they tend to, out of enthusiasm, sometimes overcomplicate or over-design the device. And simplicity here is the most important thing, because at the end of the day, the engineer is designing the device. He or she is designing it for use by a clinician, not an engineer. So simplification of the technology is also another very important factor.
So I think this is where a clinician's perspective can be so valuable early in the design phase, right? Because you can help them understand where to simplify and where to kind of focus on exactly what might go wrong from a use perspective.
Absolutely. Even talking about the technology I mentioned earlier, which is the CADe device, how the software integrates with the existing scope and the monitor and how you zoom in and zoom out, all of those factors need to be taken into consideration, meaning you don't want to add more buttons for the clinician to push just to get to the correct menu option. So you should use your AI intuition to say, now I can only just ask yes or no questions instead of giving the full menu and saying, pick your option, and the menu list is 20 or even longer options.
So I think our colleagues in the audience who do human factors engineering or usability would actually really appreciate this comment from you, to keep the user, keep the patient and the clinician in view. So before I invite folks to join this conversation, Dr. Tkach, I had a simple, very, very simple question, because I'm so curious. You know, I was an engineer first, and I found myself into quality systems, and then I started reading these standards and regulatory documents. And I'll be honest with you, it was a hard thing for me. They were pretty dense, took me a while. So as a doctor, when you started reading those, I'm just want to hear your first impression and how you sort of managed to acquire so much knowledge coming from a totally different field. What did you do?
I'm going to share something that my pathology professor in medical school taught our class. He said something that blew my mind, and this phrase I use every day in my practice. It is, the eyes can only see what the mind understands. So the fact that the regulations are many pages long is irrelevant as long as you can understand the terminology and why things are written the way they're written. For example, a lawyer writes up a contract that says, I'm going to pay you residuals. Yet that contract is written as a 15-page document. And at the end of the day, that's what it says. Covers a few details here and there, but what's important is understanding the overall picture and purpose as to why it was designed and written in the way it was.
Oh, that is so perfect. I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that with us. So folks, I want to open the floor for a conversation and a discussion on this topic. I'm sure you have a lot to talk about here. So Amit, you are raising your hand. And again, guys, you don't have to wait for one person to ask and have a conversation. All of you, any one of you who wants to raise their hand, do it now, and I'm going to bring you on stage. We'll go one by one. So with that, Amit, you are on. Please unmute your mic and share what you have in mind.
Yeah, how's everyone going? Happy Friday.
Yeah,
just had a quick question about just your experience within the difference of how to kind of present clinical information or clinical data when it comes to a 510K versus a de novo. So, from your end, how does the paradigm kind of shift between those two regulatory submissions when presenting, a clinical report or clinical trial data? Can you comment on that?
Yes, I can actually. So there's a small piece of information that many people don't know and or understand. A device can be considered innovative and even get the breakthrough designation and still be a 510K. The main thing that you have to focus on is the function of the device. What is the intended use? And at the end of the day, if your data can say, my device works the same as this other device, and it's made out of the same materials and has a very similar action, and it also does, then that's how you can decide. At the end of the day, if nothing has ever existed, then yes, you have to go down the de novo pathway. And I will tell you, if you do have to go down the de novo pathway, there's ways to expedite your de novo timeline. And the first way to do that would be to submit for a breakthrough designation. The FDA has something, if you're approved for a breakthrough designation, they have something called the sprint. And in that scenario, you will get your review much, much sooner, as long as you have all of your paperwork and documentation ready to
But I think, Dr. Tkach, Amit's question is a little bit more focused on how to present clinical information. And do you take a different approach when it comes to de novo or a 510K when you're presenting this information to the FDA? Amit, if I understood you correctly, that's what you're asking, right?
Yes, that's correct. Like, how does the paradigm shift? Like, how does the thought process kind of shift when presenting the data between those two submission activities?
I understand and I appreciate. Apologies for misconstruing the question. I will say that when presenting the data, there is no difference. The only difference between a de novo and a 510K is when you present your data on a 510K, you're also presenting the data of the previous study that you are comparing yourself to. At the end of the day, your data, it has to maintain and surpass the golden standard. Mm-hmm. That's the most important part.
And Amit, what I think I would add to Dr. Tkach's comment is, if you go look up some of the de novos that have been granted already, you will find on FDA's website these summaries of the classification orders. And if you read them, you will get a lot of good ideas about how people have presented the clinical information, how they have made the argument for benefit and risk. And I do this all the time, and that's what I use to write my case study. So I would strongly recommend you go look up the database on FDA's website, download a couple of these reclassification orders and review them. I hope that will be helpful to you. Okay, with that, Megan, you are next. Please unmute your mic and share what you have in mind.
Hey, I work mostly on the device side and somewhat on the regulatory side, not so much on clinical. But the big topic right now is cybersecurity. Everybody's got to deal with it, and almost nobody has any experience. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering how much of that you're seeing on the clinical side.
I'm actually seeing it very heavily, and I make sure that one of the most important...
Dr. Tkach, just hold on for a second. Megan, may I request you to mute your mic for a while because there is an echo. Thank you. Go ahead, please, sir.
Thank you so much. So as I was saying, cybersecurity is of the utmost paramount. HIPAA regulations exist for a very significant reason. And when you are going down that route, you have to make sure that if your device collects data, it does not collect personal information. That is very, very important. If you do, the odds of you getting past the regulatory process are slim, and you have to provide a very strong justification as to why personal data is being collected for the purposes of a medical device.
So what you're saying is that try to eliminate the hazard to begin with. And if you really must have personal information, make sure you have controls associated with them. And what I will add to this is there are many guidance documents being available now, technical reports being available on cybersecurity, so much work going on, and we will actually tackle these topics in our future conversations as well, Megan. So you bring up a great point, and we will be focusing on this. In the meantime, what I would ask our colleagues to do is gather this information and reach out to me if there are some specific topics or questions you would want us to focus in our future discussions. So thank you for that question, Megan. Mark, you are next. So please unmute your mic and share what you have in mind. Mark, you may need to unmute your mic. Okay, we'll give Mark a moment to check this out. But guys, in the meantime, if you have questions or comments or just plain perspectives to share, please raise your hand. Mark, you are having some difficulties, but it's a good thing that you had sent me your question before, so I'm going to read that out. Mark, you're saying you were curious about how Dr. Tkach recommends dealing with black box issues if the V&V is the most important thing. How do you verify something if you don't exactly know how it works? And I think that's a relevant question when it comes to AI, is it not, Dr. Tkach?
It absolutely is. And part of your validation and verification and also your QMS is understanding how your AI works. If you yourself, or not personally, but as the device company, are unable to express to the regulatory body how the device works, it will not get past that stage. The most important thing is understanding how the device uses its machine learning function and what data it's collecting to then apply to that algorithm. If we're talking about AI, how it affects the ability of it to work and to detect. So the most important thing that you can do is have a justification as to why your device works the way it does. If you don't know how, yes, please go ahead.
So it's explainability, right? I think that has become a big buzzword. But being able to explain, I think there are two aspects to it. First, being able to explain what the algorithm is doing. And second, being able to do it in a way that non-technical people can understand. Most of the regulatory people will not have that level of technical insight. So I think we also need to become better explainer of the explainability of our AI, right? That's how I look at it.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, that's one of the things that I also do with a clinician's perspective is I'm able to simplify complex terms and concepts into something that is digestible to a person that does not have as much exposure as the engineer does to this type of technology.
Yeah, and the second point here would be perfection is not the goal here. I think the goal here is to be clear enough and recognizing the uncertainty and ambiguity and what all we don't know. And that will attach to the uncertainty of benefits and uncertainty of risk. And that should inform our overall benefit risk. I think that's the way I would look at it. So guys, we are running short on time, but Namit, you are on. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to unmute your mic and share with us what you have in mind.
Hi, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I have a broader spectrum of questions regarding AI into QMS and documentation and the HIPAA rules. So as Doctor mentioned that there is a neural network which gets trained and it's connected with some open source where there is a to and fro of information. So let's say a company is using AI to set up their quality management structure or to analyze the complaints and to do some risk assessment. How does the cybersecurity as well as HIPAA and ethical code can be placed? Because I believe for my understanding, it's a gray area because there's always to and fro of information from open source to the neural network where it can do the analysis for the AI and give out the information or the analysis to the company.
It's a great question. Go ahead, sir.
So just to be very honest and blunt about it, Namit, the simplicity of my answer might be upsetting to you. At the end of the day, when something is open source, that means it is both giving and collecting data. And as an open source implies, anyone has access to that information. So if your device collects personal data, for example, and you then hook it up to this open source cloud AI to try to retrain your device, all of that data is now accessible to everyone. So it does not meet HIPAA regulations.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess here what we would want to pursue or explore is why we need open source and to what extent do we need to use it? Because I think you were mentioning the risks associated with that, but in some cases we need to use it. So we have to be very mindful of the why we want to use open source and how best we can control it, understanding the risks associated with disclosure of personally identifiable information. And if you have done this work up front, I believe you will be able to exercise the right level of control. Would you kind of agree with that, Dr. Tkach?
I would agree with that. And I will also add that you can use open source in your dummy data testing. Mm-hmm. When you go live, when you try to implement your technology in a trial, then the documentation has to be excruciatingly thorough to prove that everyone is protected.
Yeah. And there's an aspect of Namit's question that I think we didn't clearly address yet. So Namit, I want to make sure I touch on that. You were asking specifically about the use of AI inside your QMS. That's correct?
Yes.
So one application use case I can think of is that you have all these complaints data coming into your complaints handling, and now you are implementing AI to give you intelligence out of that complaints data. And that's where you'll have the interface of personally identifiable information. You must safeguard and protect that in a way that is not disclosed beyond what is necessary. So I hope you will treat that as any other situation, like our colleague is mentioning here, Dr. Tkach, from a clinical perspective or internally QMS perspective, it's the same consideration of risk. And always ask the question, why do I need it? If I can do without it, my job will be simple. Guys, this is so fascinating. I love it. I love the conversation. I'll give a couple of minutes to Dr. Tkach to collect his thoughts and share with us just 2 or 3 key bullet points we can remember today. But in the meantime, I'm going to share with you just a couple of quick housekeeping announcements. I see many of you are joining us for the first time, so I really welcome you. Please know that this conversation happens every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern with a new guest. We talk about many different topics in a very casual conversational way. You're welcome to join anytime you want. Put this on your calendar, 11 a.m. Eastern, if you're interested. And if you miss a couple of weeks here and there, know that all the recordings of our conversations are available on the Let's Talk Risk website. I have given you a link to subscribe to the Let's Talk Risk website. 80% of the content on that website is free. All of these recordings are free. You don't have to pay anything. So I'm doing this for you to create a resource for you so that you can continue to learn. And finally, the most important thing I'm going to tell you guys is that all of you, without exception, no matter how much you think that you are so new to the industry, you don't have as much experience, doesn't matter. Every one of you has a unique perspective, a unique way of looking at things, some of the problems you are facing that we should learn from each other. You are welcome to become a guest, to come on this show as a guest. Just raise your hand, reach out to me. All we are looking for is willingness to share and learn from each other. So you can be a guest on this show if you are interested. Please reach out to me anytime. With that, Dr. Tkach, please share a couple of key bullet points that we can take away today.
Thank you. To me, the most important thing is the saying that I learned earlier from my professor. The eyes can only see what the mind understands. And what that means in this situation is allowing yourself the time to learn and absorb as much material as possible before pushing for an endeavor you're not sure you're ready for. Whether you can educate yourself or find an expert to help you in that manner, that's the most important and crucial way that you can mitigate risk.
Perfect. Wonderful. And what we are hoping to achieve through these conversations is improving our understanding through collective sharing so that we can see more and we can improve ourselves. That's what we are trying to do. So, guys, thank you so much for being a part of this wonderful conversation. Thank you, Dr. Tkach, for sharing your insights. I love some of the practical tips that you have shared with us. This is a complex topic, and this is not the end of our conversation. We're going to be talking more about these topics in the future. So please stay connected, please stay tuned, and join us next time. Thanks again, everybody.
I look forward to talking with you again soon. And if anyone needs any help, feel free to reach out over LinkedIn.
Perfect. And yes, I want to emphasize that again. Thank you for bringing that up. We are also building a community so you can connect with anybody on this panel in the audience. I think you have the ability to message them. Just don't spam anybody, please. But we are also trying to build relationships. So reach out to Dr. Tkach if you have a follow-up question that didn't get answered. If you want to learn more about what he does and how he could potentially help you, please reach out to him. I appreciate everybody's time once again, and we look forward to meeting you next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.